All right, let's get it rolling here and let's dive into the Youth Pastors podcast. So, thanks for joining us. This ain't going to be long. So, I say we dive into it with some energy, as well as just the overarching question: why youth ministry? Why be a youth pastor? John, Will, Rush, can you remember the moment, the place, the time, or anything about what it is that made you decide, or even the moment of, I think I'm going to become a youth pastor?
I remember when it was my senior year, you were leading our youth ministry fully at that point, but your sister, who had led with you for a while, was visiting for the first time since she had moved to Illinois. We were in Central Florida, and I remember hearing from someone, "Hey, Megan wants to talk to you," which was like that was just whether Megan meant to or not. That was the rep. I'm like, I haven't been with any girls in at least 3 months, so I don't know what she's getting mad at me about. But it was her talking to me about going up to Illinois, where you and I would eventually youth pastor together, where you were from originally, to be an intern in youth ministry, to be one of our interns in the youth ministry. I had really only been a Christian for a year at this point, but had dove headlong into it. I was a C student trying to become a professional Halo player before YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. And so the chances of making money in video games at that point were not great. So I was honestly like, I think I'm just going to join the army. And so in some ways, I'd love to say that I remember it all connected. But my initial thing was like, these are the people that had really benefited my life. These were my people. It was more about me saying like, I'm going to bet on my tribe. And I think when you're a young person, if there are voices that are older than you and wiser than you and have invested in your life, follow those voices. I don't even mean tribe like my friends. I didn't make decisions based off of what my friends were doing. I made decisions based off of what the older voices in my life were instructing me. And it just made sense. And so that was why I initially did it, is because I had nothing better to do, but also because I had discovered this is one of the best things that I can be a part of, because these are the best people I could be around.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know for me, like I had like a specific moment. It's weird because I was trying to figure out, I knew that I was wanting to go into ministry because just, I don't know, God had captured my heart fully and impacted my life dramatically. And it was one of those things where I was in Honolulu High School. I was coming down the stairs. There's two sets of stairs by the Performing Arts Center where, I don't know how many years later we were able to actually start a church.
Yeah.
But I had the Wednesday morning gathering in there. I was coming down the stairs. And at this point in my life, I had decided that I was going to be a traveling evangelist because I just thought maybe that's what I was supposed to do in my life. I wanted to travel and speak and, I don't know, scream at people on a microphone. And then I had this moment where I actually led my first real friend to Christ, and had this moment of crap. Now, what am I supposed to do? And all I could think about was like the dream that I am holding on to is traveling around the world and speaking and communicating, getting them down to an altar to make this huge decision. And then what? I'm just like, see ya, peace out. And dude, my whole like worldview began to shift of, dude, not no, this is where the journey actually starts. And my heart really shifted towards discipleship. And so it was like a major thing. Um, I think that I've just always continued on that trajectory of take care of people, take care of people, take care of people. And we had a brief moment yesterday just going, dude, I feel like I get overly annoyed, and I feel like you get overly annoyed because we have conversations with a lot of youth pastors in the topic of programming. They spend all of their energy, time, and resources on the program or programming and scheduling and all these moving pieces. And they spend very little time in proximity of people and students. And so I think one thing we're really excited about is to dive into over and over again on this podcast is the actual reality and actual journey and what should be known as discipleship, which is a word that I don't know. I feel like a lot of people outside of the church maybe don't know. And I don't know, is there a modern slang word for discipleship that doesn't sound so old?
You saying all this makes me think of the question of what's even more important than maybe why I started youth ministry is why I've stayed in youth ministry, and why, even though seasons of life look different for you and me, we're still in the game and try to stay and as close to the front lines as possible of youth ministry. I would say we're both now in a season where sometimes, though, to steer the war in the right direction, you have to you can't always be at the front lines. And we both put in over a decade of being on the front lines, and we try to live a lifestyle of being on the front lines with people. But right now, I think we're, even with the relationships and networks we have and what we're trying to do with churches, is we're trying to zoom out a little bit, get back to the general's tent and go, hey, 2024, there's still 2/3, according to Lifeway research, of teenagers who regularly had attended church who stopped after youth ministry. That was like the stat basically when I just started. And I remember when I had just started back in 2010, that stat was like what everyone was used to as well. So part of why I've stayed in youth ministry is I go, why would I go be a campus pastor? Why would I plant a church when the last thing that I had my hands to, we haven't won yet? And to me, I think it's an incredible misstep that we keep launching new churches instead of fixing this generational gap. And it's almost like we have churches built to find people when they're 37 and broken between the age of 18 and 37. We're like specialized in that. But what if we could be a church that helps people follow Jesus all the way from 18 and just never look back? That is a question that whatever anyone's definition of discipleship is, whatever anyone's emphasis has been on programming, has not been able to figure out yet. And I think that's one of the driving things that we're like, we will help churches do this. We will help ministries do this. We will help youth pastors and students do this because we just haven't been able to figure out why this keeps happening.
I feel like that's such a common vision piece that I hear so many senior leaders talk about. That's the dream for their youth ministry. But then it's also paired with, but all your events are self-funded. Thanks. All right. So what would you say to, if there's some youth pastors, maybe they're older or younger, doesn't really matter, but what would be some red flags they could look out, or maybe yellow flags, warning shots of being like, oh, how do I know if I'm spending too much time? Is there a sweet spot, right? Am I spending too much time programming versus spending time with students? What does that balance look like, and how much energy should go where, and how do you dictate what is what?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things ever, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on this. On what it was actually like outside of my idealized memory of myself, but I think one of the best thing that I did what I have done with my life is I took a group of 6th graders and I was their leader all the way until they graduated high school. Even after I had become the youth pastor, I stayed leading that group. My wife helped me lead it starting when they were in 7th grade. And that was one of the most rewarding things, but also educational things about the life cycles of what people go through from 6th grade to 12th grade. And so I don't know if I ever tried to quit that. And you said, John, don't finish strong. Or if I ever tried to big time that, I don't remember that, but I also could have seen myself.
I think actually you had the desire to go up with them. I think because you knew the journey as well of stepping into those trousers of moving into the high school role. I think if I could go back, there's a lot of ways that maybe I would implement, try to level up. I'll just use you as an example to go, instead of you just being the leader of this small group for X amount of years, when we hit certain key points, how do we level up your leadership as the small group leader? And without it being you, right? Not trying to develop you because you're going to be the youth pastor one day, but for every life group leader, hey, here's the long journey. This is great. But these leaders just stay in this role, and it's this role for 3 years, 4 years, 7 years, if you're that blessed as a youth pastor. If you're just a middle school pastor or just a high school pastor, I don't mean just as condescending, but that's your sole role. It's a lot harder for you to let leaders move up, because I never see high school pastors sending leaders down. I only ever see them requesting to receive leaders up. They'll just leave that there. But the journey of going, how can I elevate and build that team? Thinking of like I'm an executive mindset, right? The more I can level up this life group leader, yes, you were with them since 6th grade, but when they hit 9th, 10th grade, you're overseeing the life group, but you're overseeing the leaders in the life group. And I think this became more of a reality to me when I became a dad, is some people are really scared to have other voices in their kids' lives, but having been a coach, having been a teacher, having been a pastor, all these things, I'm like, dude, I need as many positive role model voices in my own kid's life as possible. And you better believe I'm doing the work. We just signed my kid up for the fall soccer league yesterday morning, and you better believe I was requesting a specific coach who I want to be pouring into my boy. And I don't think parents do the due diligence, but sometimes I don't think youth pastors do either. They're like, they view themselves as the voice, or the life group leader views themselves as the voice, and not who are the other voices I need to bring in under. I care so much about these students. I know perfectly who I could go get that would be an awesome, incredible role model. And that the youth pastor's already Indiana Jones themselves out to let the youth leader be that life group leader that moves up. But now the life group leader takes that same model and brings other positive influences into that life group, steps up and steps out, and can manage multiple things, right? It's
Yeah.
building their own leadership abilities.
Well, I
I think
mean,
that's something I would try to build. Yeah.
I love that. And we're going to do a longer episode on this topic. And we just wanted to continue some of our origin story so that you guys know us personally, but know the framework where we're coming from. And yeah, the name is the youth pastors because the name wasn't taken. And I think it's a position that needs to be held by someone to say, we're going to try to figure out some definitive core values and practices, not by ourselves. We'll be using your voices and people in our lives, but some definitive practices to actually see youth ministry move forward so we can see generations not just hobble their way into church when they're 39, but that and their kids have already gone through it. Frederick Douglass has this quote. This is another one of my whys is he said, it's easier to build strong children than to fix broken men. And that I think has just been our lifeblood, like what we have done. I've been a beneficiary of that. And even when I think about our origin story, you're saying the plethora of voices. I mean, I can think of at least 8 guys that you created the environment for me to be poured into in our church growing up. And you were never a defensive leader. You were never thrown off if someone else was speaking into my life. And I always appreciated that. And what I want to talk about, and then I'll give you closing words on this blurb, is when you come to that proximity, I have some very specific thoughts for anyone between the ages of 18 to 27. And then a shift that happens when you're in the 26, 27 realm that I've lived through and that I believe in. And I think we can get into the weeds and some of that. I think it's really helpful. Just a shifts of like when you should delegate, what you should delegate, what's the proximity, when is there a time to actually lean in and be their friend? You know why? Because you are 21. So stop acting like you're 31 because you might as well play to your advantage. Because then when you're 31, you're not as close to them. The why is what I think is so beautiful and what I hope what we do not just says but shows that all these years later, you and I are still together. And even as we were talking during this, one of those kids I was talking about messages me, shout out Ray, because we're playing video games together tonight. He's got his own kids and we talk every week because the why of youth ministry, the why of all ministry should not be what we accomplish, but it's who we get to invest in. And there's no greater feeling of significance than knowing you've journeyed with people. And I think some youth pastors, Garrett, keep getting, and just pastors in general, get kicked out of the game because their ministry has become VIP connection cards. And they've lost the sight of like, bro, I've gotten to watch Ray grow up and go through seasons of life. And I get to be there now to say, there's a guy on your job site whose life is falling apart. And how do you lead him? In some ways, it's the same conversations we had when he was in 10th grade as on the football team. And in other ways, it's completely different. And that's the joy of life. That's the joy of ministry. That's my why of why I'm still doing it.
For anyone who wants to, there's actually a pilot episode. It's about an hour long. It's us sitting in a coffee shop talking about our entire journey, which started when I believe, were 16 up to today. And it's been awesome. But there's a part in that story, I think, that attaches itself to that mindset for me. And that was, I think I was like 22 when I was a youth pastor for the first time. And 40 now, which don't tell anyone, but it's whatever. But I realized that when I was at that age, I wasn't even married yet. Me and Rachel were together, but not married. And I was nowhere close to being a dad. And I knew that I could not be that role for anybody. And I had to figure out what the older brother type ministry. So same thing, man, that's a journey to grow into and through. And I would love to continue to unpack that at some point. But to learn more about our dynamic, because it's the coolest thing in my opinion, because I got to be your youth pastor, which was like the dopest ride. We got to partner in youth ministry and you got to pastor alongside of me. We also then got to pastor some younger people that we got to hand that baton to and watch and even then serve underneath, which was really cool. And so I think that's an awesome dynamic that we get to really dive into, which is the ability to pass the baton in ministry and watch it win. How do we serve that and not just have this weird culture in most youth ministries that is, here it is, I'm out, bye. So yeah, I look forward to that, man. It's awesome. I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah, that's great. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Wherever you're listening or watching this, we want this to be a conversation. We feel like we have an expertise, but we don't claim to be the only experts. And so we'd love to hear from you guys and add in the conversation on these really important topics. Peace, y'all.
You know what I will claim on the way out, John?
What?
I'm gonna break it. I will claim that I can't really find a lot of people that are fully and solely dedicated to building youth pastors. Whether anyone's dedicated to it or not, I don't know. I'm in.
Let's do it.